Welcome back to In Session. I'm Ryan Smith, and we are following a crucial hearing today in the Casey Anthony murder trial. A new judge has taken on the case, and we got our first look at the Honorable Belvin Perry Jr. And he took over the case after Judge Stan Strickland removed himself. Now, Judge Belvin Perry has a different style than Judge Stan Strickland. Perry is much more formal and is said to have little patience for bickering from attorneys. So you could see that change in attitude in today's hearing, and the attorneys appearing to be extra cautious, not wanting to step on the judge's toes. So let's talk it over with Susan Constantine. She's a body language expert and a jury consultant, and she joins us right now from Orlando. Susan, great to have you with us.
Thank you so much.
All right, so Susan, talk to us about Judge Perry. And you know what? Before you do, I want to play for you some sound of what he said this morning, almost immediately after he walked in that courtroom. Take a listen.
I would prefer, if it's a budget that has to do with doing this case, I got time next week and the following week. That needs to be done like yesterday.
Wow. And that wasn't too long after he stepped in that courtroom. And I'll tell you, he really had his game face on. But Susan, what kind of person is Judge Belvin Perry? Could you tell from just hearing him speak and giving directions to the lawyers?
Well, I can give you a lot of insight of what I saw. First of all, let me share with you is that when Casey entered the courtroom, there was no eye contact between her and her parents. That's usually, that's a little bit unusual because there always is some sort of engagement when they see one another. But again, in the courtroom, everyone was on their best behavior. I noticed quite a bit difference in the demeanor. You know, everyone was on, in their place. You could have heard a pin drop in that courtroom. So I saw quite a change in the demeanor overall in the posturing of both attorneys and the new judge.
Okay, and bring us back to, you said at the very top of that, you said that Casey and her family, there wasn't that same interaction. What did you see throughout the hearing on the faces of George and Cindy and also on the face of Casey?
Well, first of all, when George was, when he heard about the death penalty, what I noticed with him was there was a deep release and a deep sigh. I don't think he was really prepared for that. I couldn't get a real good glimpse of Cindy because of where I was positioned, so it wouldn't be real accurate for me to give you any assessment on that. And then the posturing with the attorneys, everyone was, again, were in their seats. They weren't gesturing between the two of them. They were very focused on what the judge was having to say. And so really there wasn't a whole lot to really be looking at because everybody were there. They were like good students in a classroom.
Really? Okay. That's, you know what? It's a lot of what we saw as well. People really being stiff on their toes, waiting for this judge to give them the instructions they needed. All right, well, talk to us about, let's just go through some of the parties. I know you sort of had limited information, but just on what you saw in terms of Linda Drain Burdick and Jose Baez, they were the two main spokesmen in that courtroom. Did you see anything different in their language, the way they moved, that showed you that they have a different appreciation for this judge as opposed to Stan Strickland?
Again, they're trying to put their best foot forward. Attorney Baez tends to be a little bit more anxious, let's say, a little bit more outspoken. His voice demeanor and everything changed. It was really much more professional than what I have seen him in the past. And from the state side, they were pretty much status quo. But between the two of them, there was a lot of respect between them as they conversed back and forth. There wasn't a lot of camaraderie between all of them. They weren't engaged in any sort of deep conversations, but they had equal respect on both sides.
Okay. Susan, one thing we've been talking about a lot today is Casey Anthony. We didn't see a whole lot of her, but when we saw her, she seemed very focused. A couple of our panelists talked about how it really seemed to sink in, just as you mentioned is the case for George when he sighed. It really seemed to sink in this hearing, the gravity of what she is experiencing and the fact that this trial is coming up. Did you see in her demeanor, and I know, just give us a sense of, did you see an extra level of seriousness than you've seen in the past?
Well, she was pretty solemn. She didn't show much expression at all. As I said earlier, that she didn't turn around and make eye contact with her mother or her father. She walked and she sat down. She did some grooming posturing, which she always does. She's fidgety with her hands. She's always fidgeting with her clothes and with her hair. That's anxiety. That's just leakages. When she's got anxiety, that's the way she's able to self-satisfy herself. Other than that, I really didn't see too much difference. I mean, she's not, laughing or smiling with the attorneys where she would be before Cheney Mason came on board. But now, you're seeing her demeanor. She seems to be fairly calm and subdued and a little bit fearful.
Okay, and you mentioned, by the way, you mentioned that the interaction between George and Cindy and Casey wasn't really there. Do you think that this kind of thing happens sometimes when, we've had this recent rash of evidence coming out about these letters, her talking a lot about her parents? Do you think that maybe that could have something to do with the fact that there wasn't as much of a connection today?
It could be. It could be that she was, told, or her attorneys have told her, listen, be careful of the facial expressions you're making. Be careful of your body language. Be concerned about who's watching you and how you're communicating nonverbally. And also to both sides. I think they've caught on to that. I mean, obviously you've got people like myself that are out there examining every move that they make and reporting it to the media. So now, as time has progressed, they've gotten a little bit smarter.
Okay, and one more question for you, Susan, before we let you go. You've been involved in getting jurors for death penalty cases, and we've got this issue now regarding sequestration, where these jurors are going to be coming from. Give us an idea of, from a defense and a prosecution perspective, what each side will be looking for in jurors for this case.
Well, first of all, I don't think that Casey Anthony can get a fair trial here in Orlando. I think the judges... ruling, or actually the discussion is that he was looking outside of the area, possibly pulling in jurors from other areas or districts, and then bringing them here. I think that's an incredibly great idea. Because, the first thing is she needs to have a fair trial. I mean, that's just part of the Constitution. And so that's personally my feeling about it. On the defense side, what I would be looking for is someone that, so let me back up there. I would be staying away from, on the defense side, of, single parent moms, divorced moms, young children in the family. Those people tend to be a little bit more angry. What we have found in research with young divorced mothers with children tend to be a little bit more angry. And what I'm concerned about is that would then be projected onto Casey Anthony. If I was on the defense prosecution side, I'd want some very high authoritarian jurors, people that can make decisions. They have positions like managers or CEOs of companies, someone that can make decisions and stick to it. They're more analytical. They tend to look at the evidence and weigh it and measure it, and then to decide, make a very sound decision of who they think should be on the jury, who would not be. On the other side, the defense, what we found actually that people, further down south, there tends to be a little bit more, a higher level of acquittal rates. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if it's because it's a higher minority area or Democratic, there's some say about that. Of course, that doesn't play into the jury selection at all. You can't use that to strike a juror. But the defense is going to be looking for egalitarian. Right. They're less harsh on crime, where the state side are going to be looking for more authoritarian jurors.
All right, Susan Constantine, thank you for joining us. You were right there in that courtroom. We always appreciate your insights. Great to have you with us.
You're welcome.